Welcome to the First Class Agers, the podcast for the curious, fun-loving agers. I'm Marlene Nix, and with me is
Ido Laufer.
And today we have a very interesting topic. We're going to talk about calm water and sudden changes. We're going to connect this up with how do you manage when suddenly, out of the blue, you have to take a new path because there's a sudden change in your life. And it doesn't have to be anything dramatic, but it shows you to teach you how you manage with the positive and negatives, and what do you do in between when there's this sudden change. So I would like to tell you a little bit about a recent experience I had, and then share with Ido telling you something about how he managed. Suddenly, I found myself not very pleased and being able to welcome a new bacteria that decided to act up and change my lifestyle because I had to take care of my elderly partner. I had to stay on top of everything despite the change in the circumstances and manage looking after him. And most important for me was how to balance and be in control, but yet at the same time, relax and enjoy some of my time, which is precious to me and which I call my personal enjoyment of the things that I usually do. So I had to navigate through the new path, giving what I could and taking what I could, giving the time to look after how to manage with this bacteria, and at the same time, taking for myself the time to relax and then have enough strength to keep going on for a few days. Luckily for me, again, there was a change for the better. And as I saw, there was progress in adapting to the new change and fighting this bacteria. A lesson well learned. You can manage. There are different ways of approaching a problem, but if you keep remembering that staying positive in your outlook, you usually get to the point where you have reached your goal. So Ido, I'd like to try and compare what happens to you. If you could tell me a little bit about some experience. It doesn't have to be serious. It can also be something small. How did you navigate going through a new route when suddenly everything changed?
Now, there are many examples that I can use. I think let's talk. Maybe a good example would be when my youngest son was committed to the hospital. He had appendicitis.
Appendicitis, yes.
He had appendicitis, and he was committed to the hospital with IV antibiotics, and we had to navigate because in his age, I don't want him to stay in the hospital without anybody. So immediately I went to spend the night with him in the hospital. And then in the morning, my dear wife came and replaced me. And then we juggled the two of us. And when it turned out to be for more than only 2 days, we recruited, of course, my father, who came to help, and the aunt that came to help. And we recruited more and more from the family members, and sharing and talking and receiving the so much needed help really improved the situation, and everybody were supportive, and it came up in a good way. I think it came up in a good way, even without a surgery that we could escape with antibiotics.
So it was from a bad experience with some good one-on-one time with my son, and also my wife had. We could enjoy it, and we enjoyed the lovely treatment that we received from all of the staff in the hospital. So from a bad thing, it came up to be a good experience, I think.
You know, this also, I think, gives a very good example of when you know how to enlist the help of others and how to have interaction that's a positive experience with cooperation, then you really realize that there's a way to cope with a sudden change. Because with the elderly, especially, I know I see more and more of this with friends. Suddenly the balance is uprooted. It's as though you were on a slippery slide and you're starting to go down very quickly. And instead of falling and being hurt, you manage because you regain your balance, and you do it intuitively if you know how to look at it in a positive way. Here you gave the example of the family being together, and then knowing that this would make the short change something that wouldn't be traumatic, that would help each of you to handle it. And if you think of an older person who, let's say, it doesn't have to be something very serious physically, but suddenly his walking is impaired, or there's pain, a new pain. And believe me, every day is a challenge because everything changes. It doesn't matter which decade you're in. And I see you're smiling. It's the same thing whether you're young or old. You never know what to expect. But how do you adapt to it? Are you going to complain and say, oh, this is going to interrupt my lifestyle? Or are you going to take a new route and do something about it? We've been talking about this several times, whether it was a crisis in health or a new attitude toward aging and saying, I may be old and I may be slower, but I'm functioning and I'm doing it well because what is the choice? To give up? No, you just keep going. And when you're in a positive way of thinking, then you see that there's some positive result. So your example was a good one because you said the family was together, they helped each other, there was cooperation. And for your son, it wasn't such a bad thing. Actually, he came out with a new experience and he was the center of attention, but in a good way.
And also he was surrounded by love and support, so he could feel what a strong and capable surrounding and family he has. So he has such a good base to overcome it. So I think
exactly.
it's also very, very important. When you were talking about balance and regaining balance, what came up to me is the tools that you develop in order to overcome these issues.
Could you give some examples of this?
Yes, first of all, I can tell you that my wife's father,
my father-in-law, he fell and broke his vertebrae, and he's a completely changed person in a bad way. Now he's a dependent person. He has a 24/7 support with him that lives with him, and he became an anxious person, and every change makes him very nervous. And he became a person that feels that he has so little that everything that he might be threatened, he really takes it seriously. And a good example is when his caregiver took took a leave and went back to India to see her family for a month and a half. He already started to be anxious and afraid the minute he understood that she's going for vacation. So he already lived in anxiety about a month before the vacation of the caregiver. And I think he relaxed only when she came back. But in this month and a half, he had another person, another very nice lady who took care of him, but it wasn't the same thing. And he was in a constant anxiety or a constant threat till this caregiver came back. So it's a 3-month period. And I asked him if he will be willing to learn some meditation, because it is very well established in literature and everywhere that just meditating, which can be mindfulness, can be anything, but just meditating give you a perspective. And then you can have a better life. But in my case, or in my father-in-law's case, he's so anxious and he has such a high level of anxiety and fear that every new thing, doesn't matter if it's a positive or negative change, he takes it in a bad way and he sees it as a threat. Just having a person coming to his home to teach him, he thinks of it as a liability, as a load that he needs to have a new person coming in. And so I'm so sad for my father-in-law that he cannot accept any help. He's in a position that is even pushing away any help that might be good for him just because of the fear of change.
You see, this is an excellent example of what can happen when a person out of fear is so set in his ways and doesn't even try to be curious about how something else might be better. Doesn't have the strength to say, I'll give it a try. And this is exactly the mantra we've been talking about several times, about first relax and give yourself a chance to open up a new channel. Try it. And then as you react, there may be, and most likely will be, if you're open to it, perhaps this easier way will make it easier to cope with the change. And don't lock the door before you try to look and see if there's a broader picture around you that may offer an easing up of what you're going through. And we can use many examples in old age, whether, again, it's the new change from, we talked about that before, from 60 to 70 or 70 to 80. Or if you take a 50-year-old who says, what am I going to do for myself now when I look ahead in the next few years? Or I don't want to think about it. What am I doing about it? Staying active again.
I think when we're talking about it in the perspective of levels of energy, we need constantly, any age, we need to identify the sources of good energy in order for us to live well, and be aware of this energy and be aware of what takes us away from the good energy and what depletes our good energy and what is filling our good energies. And we need to be mindful to these energies and physically and actively act in order to be in this good energetic fields. For me, for example, currently, it's also with life, it keeps changes, because things with our ability and with our adjustment we need to keep thinking about new sources of good energy. Currently for me, thanks to my 13-year-old son, the one who was hospitalized that I talked about, thanks to him, I restarted to skateboard. And we're going to skate parks together, and I'm skateboarding again. And I find out that after a tedious day of work, going for an hour skateboarding with my son, it's one of the pools of energy that I come out of it exhausted physically, but spiritually I'm in a very high level. So
this is called my time. It's for me. Look what it does to me. And it refills and recharges that battery. And you gave that an excellent example, because in this case, I can imagine, if you can give us what you experienced, you were flying high, literally, and you let go.
True. And
how did you feel when it was actually happening?
It was very frightening. Still, it is frightening, because even though I know how to fall, it's much faster pace. And
what about your 12-year-old, your 13-year-old? How do you think he sees you in that position?
I have a great experience, because what's happening, it gave me, I used to skateboard a lot when I was in my teens. And
yesterday.
Now, and now when I skateboard with my son and his friends, it's amazing that he allows me to come and skateboard with his friends. And we are facing the same fear. The only thing is that my muscle still have the memory of how to act. So I'm very frightened. And then I go down a slope. And it takes me some time to prepare myself, and then I do it, and I do it well at the first go. And then, because I have this muscle memory, and for them, they have to fall down or crash for about 2 or 3 or 4 times till they manage to do it. So they look at me and say, and they are proud to be with me because I'm succeeding in my first try. So it's
you set a good example of strengthening all the positives here. That's wonderful, because not only do they look up to you, literally, they look up and say, wow, look what he's doing. But also he appreciates, and it must be a wonderful feeling for him, because he's so close to you when he sees you doing it.
And we're passing the same route. It's not that I'm teaching him. It's not that I'm in a higher level. It's we come from the same level, and we do it together, and we progress together. And because, of course, he has more free time, he goes,
I'd say, about 10 times more frequent than I do. So he gets to improve more than I do, and then to teach me and tell me what I need to do, and show me some paths and some routes to skate that he found out that are enjoyable. So it provides him also a very good position of being the tutor to his father. So it's very important also.
You know, this also happens. It's a perfect example. Again, it's teacher-pupil, pupil-teacher, especially with the elderly. It becomes difficult at times. How do you interact with adult children? I'll give the example. You took care of the child, and the child is taking care of the parent, taking care of you. Here's your example of using sports because you've had the experience, and you teach, and you've been in situations where there are younger people, and now you're dealing with older people, with the elderly in different situations. They don't have to be medical. It could be anything. You look at the adult child who may be teaching you or doing something better than you, because as your example with the physical part of it, he is going through it for the first time, maybe, and you are learning from him as he sees you becoming his partner now.
True. It's not, it's so fun to be part of the gang of 13 years old kids. My 51st year, I'm part of the skateboarding gang of my son, of my 13-years old son, which is amazing. It's such a nice experience to be part of them, not to be better, not to be looked upon, just to be just part of the gang. So it's so
to
fun.
be one of the boys.
Yeah.
All together now. Right.
Exactly.
It does a lot for his ego, and it does a lot more for yours, because the sharing the smiles and the laughter is a bond that it's above and beyond all barriers. And you can use it with the elderly examples as well. Why is there such a good reaction between the grandparents and the grandchild, that they can understand each other about certain things, or they can have their differences, but sharing the smiling is the bond.
And when you are talking, we started with the calm water with sudden changes. So we can look at it as a good change, a change that needs to be a bad change.
Exactly.
I had a calm water and I did it some more energy, and then I got a sudden change of joining my son with the skateboarding, and I adapted and I enjoyed immensely. I didn't come when he suggested, I didn't tell him that it's too much and I'm too frightened. Say, okay, if this is the change, let's see how I challenge myself to overcome this change and skateboard again, which was something very amazing. I haven't done it for years, and a lot of fear. I had to overcome a lot of fear, because falling in your 50s is not like falling in your early teens.
It's such a good example, because it's like saying, why not give it a try?
Yeah.
Same thing. If you look at it from the positive side, look at all the pluses you had. If you look at it again with an older person who says, well, and starts thinking about it, he may or may not do it if he hesitates. But if he gives it a try, why not? So it does have a positive effect.
I think maybe I'll give another last example, then we'll wrap it up, because we have a change in my father. When I look at my father, who is one of my best mentors, and he's a psychiatrist, and he had the feeling that he has Alzheimer's. So he read the papers and he saw that there is one new drug that got approved by the FDA.
Yes.
That a drug that is being used for diabetes, and now it can be used for improving or reducing the dementia or Alzheimer's disease. And immediately he jumped on the experiment. He joined a study, and he's being one of the subjects of the study. And it's another change. It's accepting the change that he has the disease and not resisting it, accepting the change that he needs to do something different in order to overcome it, and going periodically to the clinic, of the research clinic, to be tested, and I need to come with him, and I'm also being questioned about him. And he takes it in such a good manner that yesterday was our last checkup. We always go, it's a study that every case study needs to be followed with a family member that knows him. So I'm the one who goes with my father.
It's like you said, father and son. You were the older father with the younger son. Now look how it's repeating.
Yeah.
The older father with the younger son, a different situation, a more difficult situation, but you're handling it very positively.
Exactly. And because of it, yesterday, one of the researchers that I do questionnaires every time. So she asked me all the things, the questionnaires, and she told me, I must tell you that all of the researchers here, we all love your father. We haven't met anybody like him who take it so nicely and so positively. And I said, this is my example. So this is it. The accepting of the change and flowing with it and finding the good things about them. And as we went out of the clinic to my car, all we talked about was how kind and generous the staff there to make it nicer for us. And we concentrated on the good things that we're experiencing. And it's very tedious work to be tested for, I think yesterday it was 4 hours. And afterwards, we came up, all we talked about was the good experience that it gave us. So I think can't be better to close it with this positive and optimistic viewpoint.
As they say, tired but happy. And you say, we did it. I did it. You did it in both examples. And I think the beautiful example of this was the bond between father and son. Look at it both ways, because you both benefit. And it's a very, very important feeling to say, we did it.
Okay, so I think we can close it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you liked it, please give us thumbs up, share with friends and family who might enjoy it, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching.
Feel good. Bye for now.
Bye.